So in today's video, I'm going to go over two of my favorite books that were translated by Ken Liu. So today, once again, we're going to go over Chinese science fiction. So here are the two books that I am going to go over. It's Broken Star by Ken Liu, translated by Ken Liu, and then this book goes over the most memorable stories that from current contemporary Chinese science fiction today. And this book, known as Invisible Planets, also translated by Ken Liu. And this is a really good book. And this book also has a lot of contemporary stories by contemporary Chinese science fiction writers. So let me read a couple. You've got Hao Jinfang's Hugo Award-winning Folding Beijing takes place in a new future dystopia where the city buildings all fold into each other. And so the buildings all fold together, and then people who are rich live in the folding buildings on the top, and then people who are not rich live on the bottom. So anyway, I will go over these books in a lot more detail. So welcome to my show on science fiction, where I ask the research question, does science fiction occur around the world? And I had said before, my previous knowledge of science fiction was that I thought that science fiction only existed with Star Trek and only existed with Ray Bradbury and Isaac Asimov. And so when I did the research, and that's why research is fun, because the first thing you do when you do research is you ask yourself research questions. And you ask yourself a research question. You ask yourself, what are you curious about? What do you want to know about this topic? And then you find a topic that intrigues you. And for me, I've always been a Trekkie. I've always been into science fiction. So I asked myself the research question, what is science fiction? Is there science fiction around the world? And is the science fiction and then to my surprise, I found out that each country has its own version of science fiction. And each of the science fiction stories in all of these countries bears the mark or stamp of each country's culture and identity and history, fears and aspirations. And so I'm finding it a fascinating journey as I read all the different anthologies. So far I've focused mainly on China because I'm half Chinese and I'm half American. And so for me, reading these Chinese, even though it's just science fiction, but even if it is science fiction, I'm still learning a lot about Chinese culture, Chinese attitudes, and it's fascinating to read science fiction from a Chinese point of view. For instance, in an American science fiction, I'll just always take Star Trek as the American symbolism. And so for American science fiction in Star Trek, it bears the mark of the American culture of exploration, being inclusive, diversity, a world in which everybody cooperates. And so that bears the stamp of Gene Roddenberry, 1960s America. And then when you read Chinese science fiction, it has to do with stability, harmony, obeying a central authority. In other words, the Confucian values of patriarchal obedience and everybody working together towards a common goal, a collective in which the group is more important than the individual, and that there's implicit trust in a figure of authority, something like that, at least compared to American science fiction. And so I'm currently reading a Liu Well, Liucixin, and his book is Supernova Era. And so I'm reading his book on that topic, and it's fascinating to see how it wraps around a Chinese version of science fiction. I'm sorry if I can't say the name. Liu Cixin, that's it. That's his name. And anyway, so today I'm going to go over Broken Stars. It's a contemporary Chinese contemporary Chinese science fiction in translation, featuring stories by Siqing Liu and Hao Jingfiang, and 16 intriguing versions of the future from China, edited and translated by Hugo Award winner Ken Liu. So that would be this book. So, and then it has several stories, and I will go over that when I share my screen. So I hope that you're going to enjoy today's presentation, because I want all of my students to love reading and to love literature as much as I do, and to love research. And so throughout this, what I call literature review, I'm learning so much about other cultures. I learn about other cultures by juxtaposing it to American culture. So therefore, while American culture is into individualism, and then Asian culture is more like collectivism in a very generalistic, simplistic view. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that for me, reading literature is fascinating. And I love seeing everything from another person's point of view. And therefore, when you read literature, good literature, or even, whatever literature you read, you end up developing empathy, and you learn to see things from another point of view. And so for me, that's the fascinating part about reading literature, is learning to see things from another point of view. That's part of the fun, because that's part of the fun of the adventure of reading literature. So that's why I tell my students to read, because the more you read, the better you write. And the more you read, the more you expand your vocabulary. Students are always asking me, Professor H, how can I expand my vocabulary? And I tell them to keep reading. So without further ado, I will now share my screen, and I will give you my analysis of these two books. So Ken Liu, that's the guy in the picture, is an American author of Chinese descent who has made significant contributions to the field of science fiction and fantasy. While Ken Liu is a highly regarded writer in his own right, he is often referred to as the father of science fiction, alongside Liu Cixin, who is a renowned Chinese author, the author of the three-body problem. Here is Ken Liu's official website. So if you go to Ken Liu's website, and he has a lot of he has a place on his website where you can actually access some of his stories online. Let's see if I can do this. If I stop the share for a second, and I think I could go to his website. Share. Yeah, so this is Ken Liu's website, and he's the one who translated both The Broken Stars and Invisible Planets. He says, and this is Ken Liu writing, I have a big silk punk epic fantasy series called The Dandelion Dynasty, in which the heroes are engineers, not wizards. Silk punk is my invention. I use it to describe a technology aesthetic based on a science fictional elaboration of traditions of engineering in East Asia's classical antiquity. My story, The Paper Menagerie, is the first piece of fiction to win 3 genre literary awards, the Hugo, the Nebula, and the World Fantasy. Now I have to admit, I have not yet gotten the book, Paper Menagerie, but I'm definitely going to get his book to see what he's talking about, since he says that's his first foray into. And these are some of the books that Ken Liu has, his books, not books that he's translated. These are the books that he wrote. So it's not just simply he translated a lot of books. he wrote his own book, and then you could go to this website to find out more about his book. And if you click on translations, and these are the books that he translated: The Three-Body Problem, Deaths, and Waste Tide. I read all three books. And Waste Tide, as I said in my previous lecture, it talks about eco, the environment, and the destructive effects of harmful, where everybody dumps their e-waste. And then Three-Body Problem and Death's End, which is part 1 and part 3 of Liu Cixin's novel. And then somebody else translated The Dark Forest. I have not yet read The Redemption of Time, so I might get that. So he translated Chinese science fiction in translation anthologies, Invisible Planets and Broken Star. So today I'm going to talk about Invisible Planets and Broken Star. So let's see what he has under Invisible Planets. Invisible Planets, Contemporary Chinese Science Fiction. So this is the book's details, and this is from Ken Liu's official website. So Invisible Planets, edited by multi-award-winning Ken Liu, the best-selling award-winning novel translator of The Three-Body Problem by acclaimed Chinese author Cixin Liu, is his second thought-provoking anthology of Chinese short speculative fiction. Invisible Planets is a groundbreaking anthology of Chinese short speculative fiction. The 13 stories in the collection, including 2 by Cixin Liu and the Hugo and Sturgeon Award-nominated Folding Beijing by Hao Jingfang, add up to a strong, diverse representation of science fiction. Some have won awards, some have garnered serious critical acclaim, some have even been selected to year's best anthology, and some are simply Ken Liu's personal favorites. To round out the collection, there are several essays from Chinese scholars and authors, plus an illuminating introduction by Ken Liu. Anyone with an interest in international science fiction will find the Invisible Planets an indispensable addition to their collection. So here are the different stories. The Year of the Rat by Qin Shu Fan. Okay, in that story, a bunch of college losers, their mission is to hunt after human rats. In other words, these rats had been mutated and transformed into human form. They were lab rats, and then some scientists messed around with these lab rats, and then these lab rats became really huge, almost the size of people. And then they were doing damage to these huge rats were doing damage to all the neighborhoods. So all of these college losers who couldn't get jobs anywhere else were all assembled, kind of like the reserve or something. But except they were just to hunt after, they were like the rat hunters. And so once they kill a certain amount of rats, then they would be able to get a job in the government. So that was, and then the Flower of, and then the Dongdong's Summer by Sha Jia. Now that one was pretty whimsical and funny. This is about a bunch of old people who can no longer do anything because they're so old and they're bored at home. And so the father comes home with a computer prototype. And the computer prototype, Fu, that's the name of and it's a computer, but it's a computer that's powered by, like an avatar, it's powered by somebody on the outside. And then Fu, the computer, would help the old man do things, because the computer, unlike the old man who's all old, can't move that much, but his mind is still active. Fu could then move things around and stuff. And so in this story, it talks about a retired doctor who all his life he'd been active. Then when he retired, he had nothing to do. So now Fu, the android or avatar, allowed him to do stuff. So it's a fun story about computers, old people, and AI, and the future of how AI can help old people. So that's a good one. And then The Night Journey of the Dragon Horse. That was kind of sad. That's about what would happen to Earth, to all the machines and gadgets on Earth after all of the humans are killed off by a nuclear explosion. what happens to the gadgets. And so in this one, a dragon horse, he wanders about the countryside and he remembers what it was like before all the humans had been killed by nuclear explosion. And he's lonely, and he remembers what it was like before, when everybody was there to admire him, to ride him in carnivals, that sort of thing. And then after the explosion, there's no more humans. Everything is all desolate and empty. In other words, the countryside, and he's getting rusted. He has no purpose. So that's the night journey of the dragon horse. And then Folding Beijing. Okay, that one was about a bunch of, in other words, Beijing can have, you have buildings, and then they can be folded. The buildings can be folded, and then you can have the entire city moved this way, and then those buildings and everybody in those buildings are underground. Then you can go and you fold it this way, and then the buildings are up top. And so you have folding buildings that are like this, and then it can be folded in kind of like a ukulele or something like that. So that's a really great story, and it won a lot of awards. Taking Care of God. Okay, in this one, a whole bunch of old aliens, they're in their spaceships, but they've gotten so old, and the spaceships have gotten so old, and the gadgets in the spaceships no longer work. And so these old aliens, they've depended on these gadgets all their lives, and when these gadgets break, they don't know how to do anything by themselves. To me, this portends what would happen to humans if we relied too much on technology to do all our thinking for us. What would happen if we lived in a world where AI did all our thinking for us? And then humans would then deteriorate to a point to be like children, just like in Time Machine, H.G. Wells, where humanity just became like children, totally dependent on technology to live. And so these aliens then leave their ships, they come to Earth, and they tell the people of Earth, we're old and we need to be taken care of. And then we used to be your gods, or something like, we created all these planets, or something like that. And so the people of Earth then come together and take care of these old people for a little while. And so it's an interesting story, a what-if story. And so this was a interesting book, and I enjoyed reading it. It won many honors, like the Locus Award. And then let's see if I could get to the other one. And the other book I'm going to cover in this presentation is Broken Stars. So Broken Stars, okay, it has 16 short stories from China's groundbreaking science fiction writers, edited and translated by award-winning author Ken Liu. In Hugo Award winner Liu Qichen's Moonlight, a man is contacted 3 times by 3 future versions of himself, and each trying to save their world from destruction. How Jinsheng, the New Year's train, sees 1,500 passengers go missing on a train that vanishes into space. In the title story by Tang Fei, a young girl is shown how the stars reveal the future. In addition, 3 essays explore the history and rise of Chinese fiction publishing, contemporary Chinese fiction, and how the growing interest in Chinese science fiction has impacted writers who has long labored in obscurity. So here are some of the stories. The Snow of Jinsheng, that was one of my favorites. That's by Zhang Rang. And in that, you've got a time-traveling historian. And so in this future society, people can time travel wherever they want and then come back. I will continue this in a moment. So, as I was saying, as I was saying, in The Snow of Jin Yang. Okay, in the Snow of Jin Yang. The Snow of Jin Yang. Okay, so in this future society, everybody can travel into the future, and they can time travel. So there was this historian, and he wanted to time travel into the future, into the past, in order to study the past. So he goes to a very important time in Chinese history where the Song dynasty took over China, probably united it. And he wanted to take down the details of what happened. And instead, what happens is that he gets stuck in that time period. He's not able to travel back to his time period in order to write down what happened. And so he spends all his time trying to get back to his time period. And so he builds a balloon, and it's supposed to, and it causes everything to snow. You got to read the story to understand that. Anyway, he knew that the Song army was going to come and massacre the entire town. Since he was a historian, he knew in advance what was going to happen. And then he told somebody about it. And so when the people found out that all he cared about was trying to get back to his own time period, and he didn't care about saving their lives. He wanted to sacrifice their lives so that he could get back to his time period. And so all he cared about was himself. And so then of course, once they found out, once the town people found out, then they killed him. And so a good leader is someone that's willing to sacrifice himself for his people and not just think about himself. So that is, to me, that was like the symbolism of what a good leader is, for China, is someone who would sacrifice their happiness or their needs for the good of the people. So if he knew in advance that the Song army was going to come to decimate the town, then he should have told the town people to defend themselves against the encroaching army. That's what a good leader is supposed to do. Instead, all he did was build himself a big balloon trying to get back to his time period, and he didn't care if the townspeople were going to get killed by this Song army. And so he only cared about getting back to his time period. So that's a story about a selfish Chinese leader. And so I learned a lot about what makes a hero in a Chinese story. And it seems as if in many of the stories I read, the hero is someone who's willing to sacrifice their personal life, their happiness, for the sake of the people. And then, the New Year train. The robot who liked to tell tall tales. And so in this one, there was a king who's really, really honest. And then his son likes to tell lies. And actually, the son wasn't telling lies. And so one day, the son was playing outside. He falls through a hole, and kind of like Alice in Wonderland. And then he sees all kinds of wondrous things when he goes into this kind of Alice in Wonderland world. Then, like Alice in Wonderland, when the son came back to the kingdom and he tried to tell people about what he saw, they all thought he was lying. And so then the king instructed the robot to tell bigger lies than his son. Not the king, the son then instructed the robot to go around the world and find even more wondrous tales than his, to make the liar's son make the people realize that the liar's son was telling the truth. So that's kind of hard to explain. And then the restaurant at the end of the universe. Okay, in this one you have a writer. He's down on his luck. He doesn't have, his books. At first, he wrote a book that sold, but then he started having a string of really bad books. So he approached this magical, mystical being, and he traded his ability to love just so that he could have other abilities, kind of like Faust, selling your soul to the devil type of thing. And so he sold his ability to love, which means that he can write great novels. He's got the ability to write great poetry, but he doesn't have the ability to love. And so he's able to achieve great fame, but his life is really empty because he doesn't know love. And so that is a very poignant story about what's important in life. And what's important in life is love. Because if you don't have love, it's all very empty. So I'm not going to go over all of them. Oh, and submarine. Yeah, that's got to do with the class inequality where you have these submarines where all the peasants live in the submarines because land is so expensive and housing is really expensive, and only rich people can afford to live in the apartments and housing. That's just like what's going on in the housing crunch in the United States. And so they live in this, the workers live in the submarines. They live offshore, and then they're peasants. Meanwhile, the rich, and then every morning they would leave their submarines, go to work to be the servants and maids, gardeners to the rich people. Then at night they would return back to their submarines. And I won't tell you the rest of the story, but it has a lot to do with class inequality and why is it poor people have to live in such squalor and in a submarine while rich people get to live in beautiful houses. And so that sort of thing. And so it's an interesting story. And so I'm not going to go over all the different stories. So that gives you a glimpse or a sampling of what's in these two books. And so I will now go over my and so if you go to Ken Liu's official website, there's also a place where you can actually read some of these stories online as well on that same page. So I will now go over my notes, wherever it was I was at in my notes. So here, let me go over my notes. Oh, I guess that's not my notes. Hold on, let me do that again because it looks the same. Yes, there it is. So Ken Liu gained recognition for his translation work, particularly for his English translations of Rodney Ho. Ken Liu gained recognition for his translation work, particularly for his English translations of Liu Cixin's three-body trilogy, which includes the popular novel The Three-Body Problem. These translations introduced Liu Cixin's work to a wider English-speaking audience and played a crucial role in the series' international success. Additionally, Ken Liu is an accomplished author in his own regard. He has written numerous short stories, novellas, and novels that explore a range of themes, blending elements of science fiction, fantasy, and Chinese history and culture. His works often examine the intersections of technology, society, and human nature, presenting thought-provoking ideas and narratives. Ken Liu's writing has received critical acclaim, earning him several prestigious awards in the science fiction and fantasy genres. He has won the Nebula, Hugo, and World Fantasy Awards, among others. While both Liu Cixin and Ken Liu have made significant contributions to Chinese science fiction, they have distinct roles. Liu Cixin is a Chinese author who crafted the original stories that captivated readers worldwide, while Ken Liu helped bridge the language barrier and brought the stories of the three-body problem to a worldwide English-speaking audience. As an author, Ken Liu has contributed significantly to the genre of science fiction by writing his own science fiction stories. His works often incorporate elements of Chinese history, culture, and mythology, offering unique perspectives and narratives. Through his stories, Ken Liu explores various themes, including the impact of technology on society, cultural identity, and the human condition. His writing style is characterized by rich world-building and complex characters and thought-provoking ideas. In addition to his own writing, Ken Liu has actively promoted Chinese science fiction by translating and introducing the works of other Chinese authors to English-speaking audiences. His translations of Liu Cixin's three-body trilogy, in particular, played a critical role in popularizing Chinese science fiction worldwide by translating and bringing these stories to a broader readership. Ken Liu helped bridge the cultural and linguistic gap, fostering greater understanding and appreciation of Chinese science fiction. So these are the 3 books actually that Ken Liu has. He did the first part, Three Body Problem, and the third part of Three Body Problem, and he also translated Waste Tide. All 3 books I read and I loved. Waste Tide dealt with e-waste and all the garbage of the gadgets that we all use, and then the deadly consequences that has on the migrants. And then Three Body Paragraph and Death's End deals with the trilogy of Liu Shiqing's trilogy of what would happen if aliens were to invade Earth in 450 years from now, and how Earth would prepare for such an alien invasion. And so Ken Liu's contributions have earned him recognition and accolades within the science fiction community. He has received prestigious awards such as the Hugo, Nebula, and World Fantasy Awards for his writings and translations. And so he through his dual role as author and translator, Ken Liu has become an important advocate for Chinese science fiction. Indeed, his translations have had an impact on the popularity of Chinese fiction, science fiction, on the global stage. And so the Three Body Problem, The Dark Forest, and Death's End is a groundbreaking science fiction series and explores themes of physics, philosophy, and humanity's place in the universe. His translations from Chinese to English were instrumental in introducing Liu Shiqing's visionary storytelling to the world. So by making these stories accessible, Ken Liu played a pivotal role in bridging the linguistic gap. So here you have, so today's lecture is going to go over Invisible Planets and Broken Stars, where Ken Liu translates Chinese science fiction that brings Chinese science fiction to a Western audience. For me personally, these books were an eye-opener and not only revealed another world of science fiction, but also revealed a world of science fiction with a Chinese touch. Broken Stars and Invisible Planets are 2 anthologies edited by Ken Liu that showcase contemporary science fiction stories. While the themes explored in each story vary, there are several overarching themes that emerge throughout the collections. Cultural identity. Many of the stories in these anthologies delve into questions of cultural identity, exploring how individuals navigate their Chinese heritage in a rapidly changing world. They often examine the tensions between traditional values and modernity and the impact of globalization on cultural practices. Technology and its consequences. Science and technology play significant roles in these stories, often serving as catalysts for exploring ethical dilemmas and their impact on society. The narratives question the consequences of technological advancements such as artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and genetic engineering, and probe the human condition in the face of rapidly evolving technologies. Alternative histories and speculative futures. Some stories in the anthologies offer alternative historical narratives or speculative futures that reimagine China's past or explore potential paths for its future. These narratives often blend elements of science fiction and fantasy to create great stories. So social and political commentary. Through the lens of science fiction, these collections comment on various social issues in China. They address many different issues, human relationships and emotions. While these anthologies are rooted in science fiction, they also explore universal themes of human relationships, emotion, and the human experience. The stories delve into personal struggles, love, loss, and the search for meaning in a complex world. Overall, Broken Stars and Invisible Planets offer a diverse range of stories that reflect the cultural, technological, and landscape of contemporary China while also engaging with broader themes that resonate with readers around the world. Ken Liu states that Broken Stars is by no means an exhaustive or complete representation of Chinese science fiction, but he merely collected stories that for him were memorable. So here I'm going over the same thing I went over before. So The Snow of Jin Yang. In this story, a time-traveling historian from the future lands in ancient China to study history. The historian ends up becoming stuck in the past when his time-traveling machine fails to take him back to his time. In order to propel himself back into the future, he builds a balloon that needs a historical event to fuel it back, and that means that the Song has to kill everyone in the whole town to propel the historian back to his time. Notice how the historian is willing to sacrifice the town to get back to his future and only think about himself. The story explores the clash between tradition and progress and the power of personal agency. In my opinion, this story teaches by Zhang Rang teaches that to be a good leader, you have to care about the people more than yourself. And being a good Chinese leader means you sacrifice your own happiness for the good of the people. Folding Beijing by Ho Jingfang. This award-winning story depicts a future Beijing that physically folds and unfolds to accommodate its different social classes. The narrative follows a waste collector as he navigates the city's shifting folds in an attempt to improve his daughter's future. The story highlights issues of social inequality, urbanization, and the human nature for upward mobility. I thought it was fascinating how the author describes the actual foldings of the buildings in the story. Taking care of God. A group of white-haired aliens who claim to be gods descend on Earth because they claim their ship is broken and they do not know how to fix their ship. Because of China's Confucian culture of taking care of the old, the Chinese people take care of these old aliens for a while. And actually the whole world takes care of these aliens for a while. So very amusing story about what happens when people rely so much on technology, they lose the ability to think for themselves. Night Journey of the Dragon Horse. In this story, Dragon Horse remembers Earth before a nuclear explosion killed all the people on Earth. This is a very sad and haunting story about what happens to discarded technology once people disappear. Broken Star by Tan Fei. Jia Ming's mother died when she was a child. She always dreamed in her dreams of a pale woman claiming to be her mother who could use the stars to tell her the future. Her father had told her that her mother had died, so when Jiang Ming sees the woman in her dreams, she thinks she is dreaming that she is seeing her dead mother. It turns out that each night her father puts a sleep potion in her food, so she would fall asleep so as not to realize that the father had locked the mother in another part of the house. You have to read the story to find out more. Submarines by Han Song. Working peasants live in submarines on the outskirts of town, while the rich live in apartments on land. The peasants then leave their submarines to be the maids and servants for the rich. When the subs catch fire, the peasants all die out. Did no more peasant submarines come to town anymore? Did Han Sung write this story to write about the injustice of the inequality between the rich and the poor? The New Year Train by Hao Jingfang, where 1,500 passengers disappear, then reappear again at their destination terminal. The train travels using interdimensional technology. In this story, the way Hao Jingfang describes how the train travels with the latest technology is so fascinating that Spock himself would say with a raised eyebrow, fascinating. 100 Ghost Parade Tonight. A little boy lives in the ruins of a carnival. Everything in the carnival is in decay. It is an old carnival that nobody goes to anymore. The boy lives among ghosts. He is raised by a ghostly mother who then, when she was alive, used to have children. And she spends her day combing her hair. The father is a monk who found the boy on the steps abandoned by his parents. Now, does this story symbolize how the rapid technological growth of China results in people only liking what's new and throwing away what's old? So this is like consumerism. These stories, these examples, provide just a very small glimpse into a diverse range of stories found in Broken Stars and Invisible Planets, showcasing the themes of cultural identity, technology, and alternative histories, social and political commentary, and human relationships in modern-day China. Broken Stars and Invisible Planets are two anthologies edited by Ken Liu that features science fiction stories from contemporary Chinese authors such as Liu Xiqian, Jia Sha, Tang Fei, Hang Song, Bao Su, Hao Qing Bang, and many more. These collections explore various themes related to Chinese culture, identity, and the impact of technology on China. Many of the stories in these anthologies intersect with the concept of Sino-futurism. So what is Sino-futurism? So Sino-futurism, this is supposedly the picture of China in the future, and I did it with Bing. Okay, so Sino-futurism is a cultural and artistic movement that examines the intersection of Chinese culture, technology, and the future. It explores how China's rapid modernization, technological advancement, and globalization have shaped its cultural landscape. Sino-futurism often reflects on China's complex history, its aspirations for the future, and the tension between tradition and progress. Ken Liu, as an editor and translator of these anthologies, brings attention to the works of Chinese authors who engage with Sino-futurist themes. The stories in Broken Stars and Invisible Planets often incorporate elements of Sino-futurism by exploring the implications of technology, society, and cultural identity within a Chinese context. They reflect on the country's historical and cultural legacy while speculating on its future trajectory. By showcasing these stories, Ken Liu contributes to the exploration and understanding of Sino-futurism, allowing readers to engage with the complexities of Chinese culture and its intersection with technology and the future. And so it's worth noting that while Sino-futurism is a concept that intersects with, in other words, it talks about China and its future, but Sino-futurism can also be seen in other art forms. And so Ken Liu acts as an advocate for the reader, for us to see Sino-futurism, and through his translations and editorial work, he brings Chinese speculative fiction to a wider audience. So here are some of the characteristics of Sino-futurism and Techno-Orientalism. Sino-futurism is often associated with Techno-Orientalism, a term that refers to the fusion of technology and East Asian cultures in Western portrayals. It explores how Chinese culture and identity are often depicted through a futuristic lens, incorporating elements such as advanced technology, cybergenetics, and artificial intelligence. The stories in these anthologies engages or subverts these techno-orientalist tropes. Cultural critique and subversion. Sino-futurism as a cultural movement offers a platform for Chinese creators to critically examine and challenge dominant narratives about China's technological progress and cultural identity. The stories in Broken Stars and Invisible Planets subvert those narratives by presenting alternative visions of the future or exploring the consequences of rapid development. Cultural hybridity and globalization. Sino-futurism often reflects the hybrid nature of contemporary Chinese culture, shaped by both local traditions and global influences. The stories in these anthologies may feature characters, settings, or themes that embody this cultural hybrid structure, reflecting the complex interplay between Chinese and global cultures. Futurism as a tool for cultural exploration. Sino-futurism, including its presence in science fiction literature, provides a platform for Chinese creators to explore and express their cultural identity in a rapidly changing world. The stories in these anthologies can serve as a lens through which readers can gain insight into Chinese perspectives on technology, culture, and the future. By highlighting these aspects, Ken Liu's work and the stories in Broken Stars and Invisible Planets contribute to the broader discourse surrounding Sino-futurism and its impact on speculative fiction. They provide a rich and diverse collection of narratives that engage with the complexities of Chinese culture and its relationship with technology and the future. So here it incorporates all of this, okay, and it engages, so Sinofuturism, historical and social commentary, is Sinofuturism engages with China's complex historical and social context, often offering critiques and reflections on the impacts of rapid development, globalization, and social change. It explores issues such as cultural preservation, government control, and social inequality. So here I'm doing a comparison between Sinofuturism and Afrofuturism. So Sinofuturism is about China and its future. Afrofuturism is about Africa or African Americans and their future, and how they're depicted in the future in speculative fiction. And that Afrofuturism and Sinofuturism are two distinct movements. While Sinofuturism focuses on Chinese culture, Afrofuturism centers on the experiences of the African diaspora, and it explores the intersection of African culture, identity, and technology, addressing issues of racial identity, colonialism, and liberation. And while Sinofuturism incorporates futuristic aesthetics, blending Chinese cultural elements with advanced technology, Afrofuturism, in contrast, incorporates elements of science fiction, fantasy, and technology to reimagine African experiences. And so Afrofuturism celebrates Black culture, history, and spirituality, merging African culture with technology. Sinofuturism talks about China and its historical and social context, and while Afrofuturism examines the African experience and addresses themes of racial identity, systemic oppression, and the quest for liberation. And it often challenges and Afrofuturism often challenges Eurocentric narratives and imagines alternative futures where Black people thrive. Afrofuturism strongly emphasizes the African experience and its connections to other cultures around the world. Afrofuturism explores the experiences of Black communities globally, whereas Sinofuturism focuses on Chinese culture and its interactions with global influences. And while Sinofuturism also explores the global connections of contemporary Chinese identity. So while both Sinofuturism and Afrofuturism explore similar themes of culture, technology, and the future, they do so from different cultural perspectives. Sinofuturism and Afrofuturism offer unique lenses through which to examine the impacts of technology, globalism, and cultural identity on diverse communities. Both movements contribute to the broader landscape of speculative fiction and cultural discourse, enriching our understanding of the complexities of our rapidly changing world. So do Star Trek themes fit in with Chinese sci-fi books? And so while Ken Liu's sci-fi works and Star Trek both fall under the genre of science fiction, they have distinct styles, themes, and approaches. Ken Liu's stories in Broken Stars and Invisible Planets focus on Chinese culture, identity, and the impact of technology on China in a contemporary context. On the other hand, Star Trek is a long-running science fiction franchise known for its exploration of space, futuristic society, and themes of exploration, diplomacy, and social commentary. While there may be some overlapping themes between Chinese and American science fiction, such as the exploration of technology and its consequences, cultural diversity, and ethical dilemmas, the specific contexts and narratives they explore differ significantly. Chinese science fiction tends to have a more grounded and culturally specific focus rooted in Chinese history, society, and contemporary issues. Star Trek, on the other hand, takes a more expansive and speculative approach, envisioning a future where humanity has achieved interstellar travel and encounters alien civilizations. That said, both American and Chinese science fiction contribute to the rich tapestry of science fiction and offer unique perspectives on the human condition, technology, and society. Fans of both may find elements to appreciate in one or the other, but it's important to recognize that they have distinct styles and storytelling approaches. And so these examples, so here, themes of cultural identity. So in Ken Liu's The Paper Menagerie, this powerful story explores the struggles of a Chinese-American boy as he navigates his dual cultural identity. It delves into the challenges of assimilation, the preservation of cultural heritage, and the complexities of family dynamics. Star Trek, the original series, episode Amok Time. This episode explores Vulcan culture and the emotional struggles faced by the half-Vulcan character Spock. It touches on themes of cultural identity, traditions, and the conflict between rationality and emotion. And so in many ways, Spock, the depiction of Spock was a depiction of Asian culture and a lot of times Star Trek would use Asian culture or African culture as examples for their alien cultures. So these examples highlight how Chinese science fiction often focus on specific cultural contexts, personal journeys, and contemporary issues, while Star Trek takes a broader and more episodic approach to explore futuristic societies, interstellar diplomacy, and moral dilemmas. Both offer distinct perspectives within the science fiction genre, and fans of one may find elements and interest in the other, but their approaches and narratives differ in significant ways. So I'm going to be doing more Liu Shiqing's novels and Chinese science fiction, as well as Latin science fiction and East Asian science fiction, and so on and so forth in my future videos. And so if you like my videos, you can like me in the comments, and I hope to see you live long and prosper. I can't exactly do that. Live long and prosper, as Spock would say. And I will see you in my next video, where I will do even go over more books. So today's lecture was on Broken Stars. I don't know if you can see that. Broken Stars by translated by Ken Liu, as well as Invisible Planets. So you should get these books at, let's see if I could go like that, yeah, so that you could see the book, yeah. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me anytime. Let's see if I can find where the stop thing is. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me anytime.